What if the one person you thought would pass through your life like a stranger arrived in a storm and changed everything you believed about fear, trust, and safety? The sun over New Mexico was a burning hammer that day, turning the air into shimmering waves that danced over the dry land. The Dustwater Way Station sat in the middle of this empty world, a lonely outpost layered with years of blowing sand. Evelyn McCrae lived there alone, working from sunup to sundown, trying to keep the place standing even when she felt like she was falling apart inside. She rose early every morning, before the sun claimed the sky. She pumped water from the deep well, her hands steady and strong from doing more than her share of hard work. The horses knew her routine better than she did. They nickered softly as she filled their troughs, their sounds the only comfort she could count on. She felt more at home with animals than she did with people. 2 years had passed since her husband Thomas had been taken from her by men who wore raven feathers in their hats. The memory of that day lived in her like a fever, low and burning. She didn't smile much anymore, didn't talk much either. Her friend Martha always said Eve was turning into stone, and maybe she was right. Stone didn't break twice. That afternoon the sky shifted. The soft blue darkened into a sick yellow haze. The air grew heavy as if the land itself was warning her. Eve paused, her hand going to her brow as she tasted grit in the rising wind. A sandstorm was coming, and not a small one. She rushed to bar the shutters and secure the animals, the roaring wind already clawing at the buildings like angry fingers. Then she saw him. At first, he was only a shape inside the swirling wall of sand, a tall man on a struggling horse. He didn't ride so much as hang on while the wind tried to tear him loose. The horse was in bad shape, limping hard, foam gathering around its mouth. Eve felt a pinch in her chest. No matter how much the world had taken from her, she couldn't turn away an injured animal. She pushed through the storm toward the stranger, the wind slapping her with grains of sand that stung like needles. When she reached him, she saw he was broad across the shoulders, his clothes old and dusty, his hat pushed low. A gun sat on his hip, not unusual for the West, but the worn handle told her it belonged to a man who had used it more than once. He nodded toward the barn, too tired to waste words. She nodded back. No talking was needed. Survival spoke for them. Inside the barn, the storm's roar dulled into a steady thunder. Dust drifted in the air, glowing in thin streams of light. The stranger led his horse to an empty stall. Eve saw the gash on the animal's leg, deep, swollen, and bleeding. "I have a place for him," she said, her voice rough from the dust. He turned to her then, really looking at her for the first time. His eyes were gray, storm gray, and held a tired sadness she recognized. She had seen that same look in her reflection every morning. "He needs tending," he said. He took a hit back on the trail, rock slide. "I have bandages and liniment." Quote, "I'd be grateful," he replied. "My name's Colt Marin. Evelyn McCrae, most call me Eve." She gathered her supplies with steady hands. Colt watched her move, the quiet respect in his gaze, telling her he understood what it meant to survive alone. Eve knelt beside the horse and cleaned the wound. Colt stood close by, arms crossed, saying nothing. The horse relaxed under her touch. She had a gift for calming frightened things, animals, storms inside her chest, memories that tried to break through the walls she built. The wind outside howled louder, shaking the heavy barn doors. One violent blast made the wooden bolt jump and shriek. Eve stiffened. If the doors gave way, the roof might go next. She grabbed a coil of rope. Colt caught her meaning instantly. Together, they pressed against the doors, sand blasting through the cracks. The rope slipped from her hand when a powerful gust hit. It shot backward like a whip. Colt lunged and caught her hand at the same time. His skin touched hers. Warm, solid, real. For one heartbeat, the storm disappeared. The wind faded. Time held still, her breath caught, his eyes locked on hers, searching, seeing more than she had let anyone see in years. In that small touch, something shifted deep inside her, something she thought had turned to dust long ago. Then he let go. The moment vanished, but the echo of it stayed, beating in her chest like a secret. They secured the doors until the storm could no longer tear at them. When the danger passed, Colt returned to his horse. Eve stood still, her hand tingling where he had touched it. She didn't understand the feeling, not yet. She only knew it scared her more than the storm ever had. Later, when she saw a thin line of blood on Colt's knuckles, she moved without thinking. "You're bleeding," she said. "It's nothing." In this country, nothing turns to infection fast. Sit. Something in her tone made him obey without a word. She cleaned his scraped skin with warm water, the simple act, deeper than she meant it to be. Her hands were gentle, his breath was steady. The storm outside raged on, but inside the barn, a quiet settled between them, something fragile, something neither of them tried to name. And that quiet was the start of everything that followed. What if the person you feared losing suddenly became the only one you refused to surrender? The storm faded into a cold desert night, leaving the land washed clean and the sky clear enough to see 1,000 stars. Inside the barn, Eve shivered as the temperature dropped. Her thin shawl did little to fight the chill. "There's a hearth in the house," she said quietly. "It'll be warmer there." Colt looked at her, the firelight of the lantern catching the silver at his temples. He only nodded. He understood the weight of her words. An invitation into her home was more than shelter. It was trust. They walked together through the wet sand toward the small adobe building. Inside, the room was neat and spare. A simple table, 2 chairs, her cot against the wall, and a faded photograph she didn't dare look at. Colt inspected the cold hearth and began laying a fire without asking. She brought wood. They worked together in a rhythm that felt familiar, though they had only known each other for a few hours. When the flames took hold, the warmth painted the walls with strokes of gold and orange. Eve sat close to the fire, her hands outstretched. Colt sat near her, leaning against the table leg, keeping a respectful distance. Silence filled the room, but it was no longer empty. It felt safe. Eve unbuttoned her canvas jacket, heat from the flames making it unnecessary. When she slipped it off, the light caught an old scar on her collarbone, a thin, pale reminder of a night she never stopped reliving. Colt saw it. His eyes softened. He didn't ask. He didn't flinch. He simply acknowledged it with a look that held empathy instead of pity. That small mercy cracked something inside her. "Have you ever been afraid of the dark?" she asked suddenly. Colt stared into the fire. "No. I fear the dark only when there's no one in it I can trust." His answer hit something deep inside her. She understood exactly what he meant. She feared the dark because of what had once stepped out of it. He feared it because of who had once abandoned him there. She didn't think. She simply whispered the question that rose from her soul. "Where should I undress?" She wasn't talking about clothes. She was asking where she could finally lower the armor she had carried since Thomas died. Colt looked into her eyes, not her body. His smile was soft and sad and kind all at once. "Anywhere you feel safe." The words unlocked a door she had kept closed for years. That night she slept for the first time without nightmares. But when she woke in the gentle morning light, Colt wasn't inside the house. Panic pricked her heart, sharp and unexpected. Then she saw the neat blanket folded by the hearth. He had slept on the floor. She found him in the barn brushing his horse. He turned and smiled. Small, hesitant, warm. A smile she didn't know she needed. They spent the morning repairing the storm damage. Colt dug new post holes with strong, sure hands. Eve fitted the rails and hammered them into place. They worked like 2 halves of something whole, steady, trusting, in tune with each other's movements. By midday, they were laughing. Real laughter. The sound startled her at first, then warmed her like sunlight. She wasn't sure when she had last laughed. That afternoon, Colt tested his horse's injured leg. The animal walked clean and steady, the limp gone. Colt laid a hand on its neck. "He'll be ready to ride tomorrow," he said. The words fell like stones in her chest. tomorrow. Of course he would go. He was a traveler. She was a woman rooted in grief. Their lives were not meant to weave together. The silence between them grew heavy and uncertain. Trying to chase the ache from her chest, Eve noticed a small patch near the house where a long dead rosebush still clung to the wall. Beside its dry skeleton bloomed a tiny desert primrose, soft purple and impossibly brave. She knelt and dug up the dead roots. Then she replanted the primrose in their place, giving it the long drink of water it deserved. Colt approached and stood behind her, silent but present. "Everything," he said softly, "deserves a chance to grow." She looked up at him, her hands covered in dirt, her heart beating somewhere between hope and fear. His eyes held no intention of leaving. Not yet. And then the sunset came. Warm, quiet, peaceful. Until Eve saw them. 3 riders on the horizon. 3 dark shapes approaching with the steady confidence of men who believed nothing could stop them. As they drew closer, Eve saw the feathers, black feathers tucked into each hat band. Her blood turned to ice. The ravens. The men who had killed Thomas. Colt saw her face change. He stepped close, his hand near his pistol, his body shielding hers without touching her. "Who are they?" he asked quietly. "The ravens," she whispered. "They killed my husband." The riders approached the house. Colt's jaw tightened. His past was riding toward him too. Silas Kane, Daniel's brother, the man who blamed Colt for a death cult, never stopped reliving. 2 haunted lives, 2 old wounds, 1 doorstep. The leader spat tobacco into the dirt and smirked. "We're staying the night," he said. "No choice in it." Colt pulled Eve inside and shut the door. "You have to run," he said, his voice sharp with fear for her. "I brought this danger. I'll draw them away." "No," she said. Her voice was steady, strong, unshakable. "This is my home. They took my husband. I won't run again. Not now. Not with you beside me." He stared at her, stunned by her fire, shaken by her courage. "You're not alone anymore," she said. "We face them together." And for the first time in years, Colt Marin, gunslinger, loner, haunted wanderer, felt something powerful and true. He felt safe standing with her. Lightning cracked in the distance, thunder rumbled, night was coming, so was the fight. What if the only way to keep someone safe was to stand between them and the whole world, even if it meant bleeding for them? Night fell with a heavy breath. The sky outside the way station sank into deep black, the kind of darkness that pressed close and waited for something to crack. Rain clouds gathered, rumbling like distant drums preparing for war. Inside the small adobe house, Eve and Colt moved quietly, each step filled with purpose. There was no panic, only steady breaths and grim resolve. Colt checked his pistol. Eve opened a chest she had not touched since Thomas died and lifted out his Winchester rifle. The weight of it grounded her. She had learned to shoot as a girl. Tonight, she would use that skill to defend what was hers. Through the window, the ravens. Fire burned low, sending shadows crawling over the ground. Their drunken laughter rolled across the yard like a poisoned wind. 3 men, 2 strangers, and Silas Kane. The past, alive and breathing, waiting just beyond the door. The leader rose from the fire, swaying from whiskey. He spit into the dirt and looked toward the house. "I've had enough of sleeping outside," he growled. "The widow's got a bed. She'll share hospitality tonight." Eve froze. Her breath left her body. Colt's hand tightened near his gun. The man's footsteps thudded toward the porch. Then the sky broke open. A wall of rain slammed down. Fat, heavy drops hit the earth with a hiss as the storm exploded across the yard. The ravens, fire sizzled and died. Lightning cracked the sky wide, turning the world blue for a heartbeat. In that flash of light, Colt moved. He kicked the door open and fired. The bullet struck the leader square in the chest. The man staggered back, shock twisting his face before he fell into the mud. Gunfire erupted. The ravens scrambled for cover, firing wildly at the house. Bullets slammed into the adobe walls with dull thuds. Eve crouched low, steadying her breath. The storm roared so loud she could hardly hear her own heartbeat. "Now, Eve, window to the right!" Colt shouted over the rain. She rose to the window just as lightning flashed again. She saw one raven diving behind the water trough. She raised the Winchester, aimed, and fired. The kick slammed her shoulder back, but she held firm. The man ducked, scrambling for better cover. Colt took the opening, firing 2 shots. The raven dropped. Only Silas remained. His hatred was a living thing. He moved through the storm like a shadow, using every flash of lightning to his advantage. His voice rose over the thunder. "Colt Marin! Come face me, coward!" Another flash of lightning, and a bullet smashed into the window frame near Eve, showering her with splinters of wood. She ducked, heart hammering. "He's by the barn!" she yelled. Colt didn't hesitate. He slipped into the night, moving low along the wall. Rain drenched him in seconds. Thunder rolled like a warning from the sky itself. Eve watched helplessly from the door as Colt disappeared into the shadows. Silas moved between lightning flashes. A ghost. Then a blast of light lit up the yard, and Eve saw it. Silas fired. Colt cried out, stumbling, clutching his side. "Colt!" she screamed. Silas charged, rage twisting his face, his pistol aimed at Colt's chest. Colt struggled to lift his gun, but his arm wouldn't obey. He was too slow, too hurt. Eve didn't think. She lifted the Winchester and fired. The bullet struck Silas in the leg. He collapsed, screaming, his pistol skidding away in the mud. Colt stepped forward, kicked the gun out of reach, and pressed his boot against Silas's hand. It was over. The rain washed the world clean. The dead lay still. Silas would see justice. And Eve and Colt were alive. But Colt was bleeding. Badly. Eve rushed to him, her hands trembling as she saw the blood spreading across his shirt. She guided him inside. He nearly collapsed into the chair by the table, grimacing through clenched teeth. He tried to wave her off. "It's nothing," he said. "It's not nothing," she insisted, her voice shaking. "Let me help you, please." She tore away the wet shirt, revealing a deep gash along his ribs. Rainwater mixed with blood and ran down his skin. She heated water, cleaned the wound, and wrapped it tight with linen. Colt sat still, jaw tight, eyes locked on her face. "Not the pain." "You saved my life," he said quietly. "You saved mine first," she whispered, their eyes held. The storm outside softened. The world shrank to the space between them. "You told me last night," she said softly, "that I could undress anywhere I felt safe." Quote. Colt watched her, breathing slow and heavy. She touched the side of his face, her fingers gentle. "Where is it safe for you, Colt?" His voice was almost a whisper. "Right here. With you." Something inside her broke open. Something she hadn't known still lived. Tears filled her eyes, but they were warm, not heavy. Colt reached up with his good hand and wiped them away, his thumb brushing her skin with a tenderness she had not felt in years. She leaned in, and he met her halfway. Their kiss was soft, slow, deep, a promise made in silence. A promise sealed in the warmth of a tiny fire, while rain washed the world outside. It wasn't a kiss of possession. It was a kiss of survival, a kiss of choosing each other. The next morning, Sheriff Dalton arrived. He took Silas into custody, listened to their story, and declared the matter closed. Justice had been served. The ravens were no more. Colt stayed. Not because he was wounded, not because he had nowhere to go, but because he finally found a place where he felt safe. They rebuilt the fence together, fed travelers together, laughed together, healed together. The desert began to bloom after the storm. Flowers pushed through the sand. Yellow, blue, purple. surrounding the small primrose Eve planted the day before the ravens came. One evening, Eve opened Thomas's journal. She wrote her first words in it since he died. He told me to undress anywhere I felt safe. I chose to undress my soul. Colt came to stand beside her, slipping his arm around her waist. Together they watched the sunset turn the sky gold. In the quiet, Eve felt his steady breath against her cheek, his presence warm, sure, and unshakable. She had once believed love was something you found. Now she understood love was something you stayed for. And in the heart of the empty desert, two wounded souls finally found home. Not in a place, but in each other.